this is James here with the Oracle Outlook for the week starting January the 6th, 2020. Thanks so much for tuning in and joining me for this week's video reading. Well, I hope that you had a wonderful time ringing in the new year, and I hope that your 2020 is getting off to a great start. Since we are now moving into the first full week in the new year, I decided I wanted to work with one of the newer decks in my collection. And so, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but December in my house has been dubbed Divination Month because one or three things is happening. Either I am gifting myself with a new deck or decks, or someone else is gifting me with a new deck or decks, or I'm introduced to a divination system I had not heard of before. And so that's been going on. That has been the trend for the last few years, and so this past December was no exception. The deck that I want to work with is the Seer's Tarot, and it was a deck that I gifted myself. And since I got it, it has become my go-to deck for client readings because I read cards professionally, and it is a wonderful deck, so I'm very excited to be working with it for this week's reading. The deck is by a woman named Chris Ann, and it is published by Hay House. So again, we're working with the Seer's Tarot. And now that I've set things up, let's get to the table and take a closer look at what the Seer's Tarot has to say about the first full week in the new year. And here we are with the cards on the table, and I'm going to take a few moments to shuffle the deck. And as I shuffle, I'm setting the intention for the information, for the insight, for the guidance and advice that is going to be most helpful and beneficial to come through the cards. As we move through the upcoming week. Feeling one more time will be good. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut the deck. Now I'm going to fan the cards out. And I'm working with 5 cards this week, so I'm looking for 5 cards in the fan that are getting my attention. Alright, so I have the 5 cards selected. Now I'm going to take the remainder of the deck and put that to one side. Now I'm going to count back 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So I'm starting with the card that I pulled first. And now I'm going to lay them out similar to a line of 5, but I'm changing things up this week, and I'll explain. So the 5 cards get laid out in a row, just like a line of 5, but each one has a positional meaning, so I'll explain what the meanings are. So this is a layout I learned when I was being trained on how to read angel cards a few years back. So I've been finding myself working with it a little bit more these days. And the positional meanings go like this. So the first card is the origin card. So this usually tells us what the situation is or what the challenge or potential challenges are within the situation. So this is the origin card. Next we move into the expectation cards, or a card I should say. So this is about our expectations And for me, expectations are about our needs, wants, desires, and anticipations. What do we anticipate? Then the next card in the middle, I could read this one or two ways. So for me, in the spread, this is the hidden influences. So it may be a factor that we are not entirely aware of, or an influence that is beneath the surface of whatever the origin card is. I tend to go with the line of five, meaning that I usually have. This usually represents the central issue or the focus, what we're being asked to focus on going forward. Then on the heels of that, card number 4 is guidance or advice. And then the last card usually represents the most likely or the best outcome. So again, we have origin, expectations, hidden influences, guidance and advice, and most likely or best outcome. So I don't start with the middle card. I usually work towards the middle. So we'll start with the card that represents the origin. So turning the card over, we have the Two of Swords. So the first thing is that swords for me can represent the mind and mental activity. The Two of Swords is usually known as the indecision card. So the origin here could be about a need to make a decision of some kind and not knowing how to best do that. Or I would say too that if we're in a state of indecision, it usually implies that there's not enough information to make the best possible choice. So here it could just be a matter of waiting for further information that would allow us to make the best possible choice or decision. Another possibility with the Two of Swords, this is known as the conflict card. So this could be because of the number 2. This could be a conflict with another person because the number 2 for me can represent relationships, partnerships, bonds, and connections. So there may be a conflict with another person, or that we are internalizing a conflict that may pertain to another person, which means that we have not stated our position, we have not shared our thoughts, because the 2 is also a number of sharing, and the swords as a suit represents thinking, so we have not shared our thoughts on the issue, and it may be because that we just find ourselves butting heads with the other person, right? So there is that to consider. So the cards are giving us a heads up of a potential conflict with another person, and it may be a matter of sharing our thoughts. Either we have shared our thoughts and maybe that has played a part into the conflict because the person didn't agree with our way of thinking, or that we have internalized the conflict, which means that we have not stated our case, we have not shared what our thoughts or opinions about the matter, those kinds of things. So again, 2 things here. Could be a matter of indecision and needing to make a choice or decision, and we have not done so because it's a need for further information, or that we are having a conflict in a relationship with another person. Now, if we go with the image, there is a woman on the card and she has a blindfold on. So that could also be pertaining to the idea of, not being able to see a situation clearly. And that could be by choice, or that could be, an unwillingness or a state of denial about the situation. Because you could clearly see on the image, she has her hands free. So she could remove the blindfold at any point in time so she could see her situation, right? So for me, that usually can represent, either an unwillingness or a blind spot or being in denial about the situation. So if we go with the idea that this is the origin, it could just be encouraging us to possibly take some action this week to allow ourselves to see a situation much more clearly than just allowing it to play with our head, right? So that is the Two of Swords as the origin card. What I love about the situation before I go on is that as a result of reading systems like Lenormand and Kipper that are heavily focused on direction to some degree, I notice that she's looking outside of the line, right? So this is about, maybe with the swords being about problems and troubles, this is about exiting or removing a problem or a challenge or an obstacle. So I like that. I'm going to go with that with direction in mind. So now, moving on to the next card. The next card represents our expectations, right? And here we have another swords card, right? So repeating majority. So this is a week possibly of either processing information. Swords can be about information, or that it's about problem solving and decision making, or something having to do with lifestyle changes and choices. Those are all how I look at the suit of swords. Now, the first thing I will say, if we go with the idea that the suit of swords can also be talking about problems and troubles and challenges and blocks and obstacles, the number 7 is about wanting to improve those situations. So here, in terms of expectation, just with the 7 of swords, I would say that the anticipation or the need or the desire is to improve a challenge, a block, an obstacle, a problem, right? So here in the image, we see this figure, and he's perched on what looks to be a hill. And so this, for me, usually represents like keeping a watch, keeping an eye on something. Usually for me, this card represents doing the unexpected. So if we are maybe in a situation where there's a need for information or there's a conflict with another person, whether we have internalized it or expressed our point of view, then this card is about, if we want to maybe improve the problem, we may need to consider doing something that we haven't done before, which is the unexpected, right? This card is also known as the theft card, right? So it may be a matter of reclaiming our, going with the idea that this is about improving a problem, reclaiming something that has been lost. You know, something that we may believe has been taken from us. But the question could be, because the 7 is a number of personal awareness and self-awareness and personal insight, maybe is that the truth of the matter? You know, has it been taken, or on some level did we choose to relinquish it and give it up? And so that may be the idea here with the 7 of Swords. It's about coming to some place of awareness. And what I love about the image is that the light of the moon in the card is shining down on the individual, right? So the moon for me, and it's the fact that it's a full moon, represents our intuition or intuitive awareness. And that kind of light, it's like seeing the light on an intuitive level that helps maybe change the dynamic of a problem, a challenge, or some kind of block. And it could just be a matter, if I read the order of the cards with the 2, if we go with the idea that the 2 is talking about, you know, maybe, you know, conflict with another person, then it's about striking a balance. And then here with the 7 being about improvement, you know, maybe it's about taking a look at our role, our contribution, and seeing maybe what part we play in that. Either the part that we have played in it, if it's a past conflict that maybe we're coming to some awareness about, or the part that we're playing in it now if it's current, right? And so what I love about the idea here about this being about doing the unexpected, this figure is facing this card. So now remember, this card is the hidden influence card, or what's at the root or the focus or the central issue, right? And if this is about doing the unexpected, it's pointing this way. So let's take a look at that card now. And here we have, wow, here we have the Ace of Swords, right? And so now we have 3 swords card, right? Again, ruling majority. This is all about mental thinking, mental processing, what's going on in our heads. It's also about information. It's also about communication, lifestyle, problem solving, and decision making. All of that going on. What I love, love, love about the image is at in the upper corner of the card, we have a spiral staircase. So this usually can represent the evolution of something, something evolving. The spiral is a spiritual symbol that can represent expansion and evolution. And so since it's in the position that represents her mind, this may be, you know, the idea that an idea is going to expand or expanding on an idea, or an idea is going to evolve. Here's why I'm thinking that's a good thing. For me, the Ace of Swords can represent the mind and making a decision, right? So we're moving from indecision with the Two of Swords to making a decision with the Ace of Swords. And here's the other thing about the Ace of Swords. The Ace of Swords can represent clarity of mind. And what I love about it is, again, we have this idea about light coming in, right? And so sometimes I'm seeing this is just coming to me, this idea, there's an expression about spiraling out. So to keep yourself from spiraling out, and the only way you would spiral out is if you're holding on to an idea and you're ruminating on it, right? You're replaying it, you're rehearsing it, it's going again and again in your head, right? So to keep yourself from spiraling out, it's about gaining clarity. It's about gaining clarity on maybe the patterns. I'm seeing this as maybe the patterns and how to take the steps to get yourself out, because this is actually a staircase if you look at the image, right? So it's about, maybe clarity of mind about the steps that you need to take to kind of get yourself out of the situation or to remove the problem, that kind of thing. I love this part of the imagery, right? Now, the other thing with the Ace of Swords for me, the Ace of Swords can represent a triumph, a victory, or a success, going along with the idea about clarity of mind, right? It's a very positive card in that regard. Now, it could also represent starting something new. Aces, for me, always represent potential for the future, or the beginning stage of something, or the start of something new, right? So if we're making a decision about the steps we need to take to change the dynamics of a problem, then this is about, starting out on that journey, right? Sometimes, though, the Ace of Swords would suggest like the beginning stages of that process could be a little bit bumpy, a little bit rocky, but do not be deterred in your efforts, because, again, this card represents a triumph, victory, or success. Now, I would say, too, because we have three cards from the Suit of Swords, it's a mental triumph, a triumph in your mind, in your thinking, right? And that's where the triumph really starts, right? It's about a change in the way that you're thinking. This is about a new idea, a new way of thinking, a new theory, a new concept, all those kinds of things, right? It makes me think with the light, it's, in comic books or comic strips back in the day, when somebody had a big idea or a grand idea, they would have a light bulb over their heads. I'm seeing that kind of imagery with this. It's like having a light bulb moment, an aha, an epiphany, right? And it may be, because I'm looking at the figure with her eyes closed, it may be a matter of tuning in, being meditative, being reflective, those kinds of things, because her eyes are closed. And as I'm talking about her eyes being closed, I also noticed that we move from having our blinders on, with the blindfold on the Two of Swords, to the blinders being removed, right? So there's that. So the Ace of Swords as the hidden influence, or the central issue, or the focus, is a fantastic card. And what I love is that direction. The direction is still moving towards the end of the line this way, right? So looking to the left is about the past. So this is about maybe being in denial about a past experience, a past challenge, that kind of thing. And then moving to the right is all about facing the future, right? And so going with the two figures over here, I'm feeling inclined to say it may be doing the unexpected, may be changing the way that you are looking at a problem or facing the challenge. It could be, would you be willing to stop facing the past or stop looking at the past and maybe change your position, metaphorically speaking, and start looking towards the future, right? And as I'm talking about that, what just came to me, some people may be thinking about what they want to do going forward with the Ace of Swords in terms of lifestyle and lifestyle choices and changes, especially in light of the fact that we are now in a new year, right? It makes me feel like some people may be setting the intention in their minds to move beyond a problem, challenge, or block or obstacle that has become a pattern, right? Wanting to break free from the pattern. So like I said, I'm seeing that with the Ace of Swords. So now let's move on and see what is in the position of guidance and advice. Ooh, okay, and here we have the Emperor, and so the Emperor is a major arcana card. So for me, they carry more weight in the reading when they show up, and I love this because for some people, it may be a matter of getting control of your life. The Emperor being a number 4 card, for me, the 4 is all about a framework, structure, discipline. And so this card is also about being an authority. So it's about being the best authority on your life. But if you are going to move forward, you are going to start something new, implement something new, then the Ace of Swords and the Emperor is all about creating a system or maybe some kind of process. What I love about the image with the Emperor is he's on a chessboard and he's holding the king piece in his hand, right? So it's all about strategy. Chess is a game of strategy. So what is the strategy? What is the plan that's going to best help you move forward? But if we're talking about lifestyle, this card as advice is asking you, what can you do to create a greater sense of control in your life? How can you establish a greater sense of order? And what I love about the gentleman's uh, coloring in terms of his clothing and the piece that he's sitting on and the chessboard is that there's a lot of red and a lot of orange in the card. That's fiery energy, right? The red can represent the root chakra, so that's about basic needs being met. And then the orange is the sacral chakra, which is all about creativity, but it's about being on fire because for me, this card can represent the element of fire. So it's about being on fire for the changes that you want to create, right? Those colors represent passion. But again, generally speaking, this card is about establishing a greater sense of order, control, and it may require some discipline on our parts this week. But it's about creating a plan, right? Nothing can happen without a plan first. And then you take action on the plan, right? But always remember that you are the best authority on your life. So if we go with the idea, I'm being told to come back to the very first card. So for those who may be having a problem or a challenge in a relationship with another person, then this card is offering you, in terms of guidance or advice, two things. Number one, the first thing is, with this card being about power and control, is that you cannot control another person, right? So you can't control what another person is going to think. You can't control what another person is going to say. You can't control what another person is going to do, right? The only person you can control is yourself, right? So going with that, it's about getting a control possibly over your reactions and responses to what other people think, say, and do, right? Again, going with the idea that you're the only person you can control, right? You could also, with the Emperor, with the power aspect, is about taking a look and seeing where are you abdicating your power? Where are you giving your power away, right? And again, that comes back to the first card where the woman could take the blindfold off and then see that the crows or the ravens are, pulling at her, right? And then she could do something about the situation, but she has to be willing first to see it, right? That's like coming to a place of admitting something, of realizing something, right? So that would be the first step, right? In a conflict situation here with the Two of Swords, one way to regain your power would be, instead of trying to butt heads with the other person, just come to a place where you could say, we're just going to have to be willing to agree to disagree, right? And just leave it at that, if you can, right? But again, the Emperor is all about power, control, order, structure, discipline, and being your own best authority on your life, right? Because when people offer their opinions, sometimes the Seven of Swords for me can represent back in the day, one of my meanings for this card was people who were maybe well-intentioned and sometimes maybe not so well-intentioned, butting their nose into your business, right? And offering advice from their position. So notice what I said, their position. When people give us advice, it's from a place of their own life experience, right? And if they haven't lived life the way you have, and they have a different experience, and they're weighing in on your life, take that into consideration, right? And so sometimes in those moments when somebody is feeling the need to push their opinion, the best thing you could do to keep your power would be to say something to the effect of like, you know what? I'm going to consider that. I'm going to take that under advisement. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And it doesn't have to go any further than that, right? So that is the Emperor. And so now let's take a look at the final card, which is the outcome. And again, I want to point out, I love the direction that all of these figures are looking towards the right. And the Emperor being the closest is looking to this outcome card. So let's see what that is. Oh, yes. Oh, I love this. Okay. So the outcome card is the Nine of Pentacles. And so now, the first thing I will say is that as the outcome card, one of my chief meanings for this card is about teaching, learning, instruction, and guidance. Because of, in more traditional imagery, the woman is seen with a falcon on her arm or on her hand, and so that's usually about training, instruction, and guidance. So it could be a matter of by the end of the week or the end of a particular experience, you're being asked to consider what is it that you learned as a result of having that experience. The pentacles as a suit for me can represent what we value. So it makes me feel like if I go with the idea that this is about a learning experience, then it's a valuable lesson that's attached to it. And it would make sense coming on the heels of the Emperor, right? And the fact that the Emperor is looking at this figure, right? So it's just a matter of, and then this card is about empowerment, right? So what is the lesson, the valuable lesson that you will learn that's going to lead to or play a part in your own self-empowerment? Oh, I love it. So there's that. It could also be that for some people, the Nine of Pentacles is about downtime. It's about leisure time. It's about, taking time to relax and unwind. So it could just be a matter of if there's been a lot of, in the word that's coming to me, drama going on, it could be about how can you unplug from the drama? Is there a possibility that you can unplug from the drama for a little bit of time? As a result, or leading into, relaxation, unwinding, taking a break from a situation. And then the last thing I will say, and again, this is just my normal mode because I tend to be very business-minded, so I see business situations in the cards. This last card can represent successful self-employment. The Emperor coming before it can represent, being the boss or being in charge. So you have two self-employment cards, and then the Ace of Swords, and actually the Seven of Swords. Both of these cards can represent a job or career change, right? So again, so for somebody in particular on a business track or being business-minded, there may be some sort of conflict in the business sense, and the conflict is actually showing up possibly to help move you in the direction of doing your own thing. Because all these two cards represent job and career change. If I read the line, job and career change that leads to possibly being the boss. And then here we have successful self-employment. But again, as the last card, I would say that there's a valuable lesson to be learned or gained through our experiences this week, and we just have to be, maybe the unplugging part is just a matter of creating the space to be open to receiving what that lesson is. And so on that note, I will go ahead and end this week's Oracle Outlook here. I'm James Himm Mitchell, and as I close, I'd like to thank you for sharing space here with me for this week's reading, and I look forward to sharing the same space with you again in our next video reading together. So until then, I'm hoping that you have a wonderful day, and I'm hoping that you have a tarot-tastic week. Take care.